Welcome to another fun edition of Writing with Subtext. I am Jim Hull, the CEO and founder of Narrative First and the creator of Subtext. And the other person on the other side is Diane. Hello, Diane.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I am good. I had another good week, so I have no complaints. Well, no, there's that little snafu with the editing software, but aside from that.
But other than that, everything's good, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
So last week we figured out the story form, which is essentially the meaning of what it is that you want to say the story. And we came to a crossroads, which is a familiar crossroads. So I just dealt with it again today, which is the decision to determine whether or not the story is driven by decisions or driven by actions. And I know you already know all this, but for those people who don't know, like if you have your 4 acts here, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and most people are familiar with plot points, and they commonly refer to the first one as the inciting incident, first plot point, a midpoint, second plot point, and whatever they call the concluding event. The neat thing about Dramatica theory is that they discovered that all of these plot points all have the same dynamic relationship to them. So that if a story is driven by actions, then all of those plot points will have the same relationship between actions and decisions, meaning some action or actions happen that then force people to take decisions, and they will all be the same. Another kind of story is driven by decisions, so that the decisions people take then force people to take greater and greater actions. So one of the ideas behind that is, for instance, if a company decides to cut back on its workforce, then everybody scrambles around taking massive action, either kissing people's butts or creating portfolios to go work somewhere else or calling other people. There's a mad dash before they make their final decision of who they're going to cut, as opposed to the company shows up to its quarterly report and they find out they haven't made any money, and so then they have to make a decision of who to cut. And so those are 2 different stories, and actions and decisions are always happening, so it's constantly an action followed by a decision followed by an action followed by a decision. The point or the purpose, the responsibility of the author is to set what they want to write about. What kind of story do they want to write about? Is it something where the actions are resulting in decisions being made, or is it something where decisions are forcing that action? Because it's super important, because that adds up to the order in which the thematic content happens, because you're going to explore it differently depending on that dynamic.
Right.
So last week, we couldn't decide. And what you absolutely don't want to do is say, oh, no, it's fine, and we'll just have a mix. Because then you'll get something like B-Movie, if you've ever seen DreamWorks B-Movie with Jerry Seinfeld, wonderful person.
Seen what?
B-Movie, B-E-E, like the insect.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that, but okay.
It's a complete mix of decision and action where the surrounding plot points, the beginning and ends, are actions, but in the middle there's a courtroom drama, which is most courtroom dramas are decision-driven, and it's just really uneven, and you just completely lose sight of what the story is all about. So that's a good one to see if you want to see what not to do. Most of the time, everybody gets it right. And the idea is once you start a pattern of it, especially once you do, the first driver, Dramatica theory calls it story driver. Once you do the first driver and the second driver, that sets up a pattern in the mind of the audience where they will expect those drivers to be the same. So if you break that, then it's going to, you can break it if you are trying to play against structure and you want to completely break down all meaning, but you're usually not trying to do that, so you want to make sure that it's all the same.
Consistency.
So, yes, for sure, because then it has integrity, and then the audience trusts you. And they tell all their friends, hey, you can trust this story, it actually works. So for you, we couldn't decide between decision and action, so what I had you do was do both, because it's a fun thing to do.
Of course.
And it looks like up here is the decision-driven story. Which one do you want to start out with?
Let's start out with the decision driven.
Okay, so here in subtext, you see Diane has her story, which is called All's Hallowed, Building with Jim Hall. That's me. And then in each story, you can have separate narratives. So the current narrative is the one that we're actually going to be looking at here. And then down here, you have all your other narratives. And if you want to look at that one, we will eventually switch to that narrative so we can look at it. But for right now, we have this one loaded up. And I've completely forgotten already. Did you say decision or the other one?
Yes, I said decision.
Okay.
Come on, Jim, show up.
I'm trying to teach as I consult at the same time.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I get all that stuff in. Okay, so then overall story, we just come here. So the overall story is the plot, or what most people consider to be the A storyline, or what you'll tell everybody, oh, this is what my story is all about. It's about, or the audience will say, well, the story is about this, this, and this, and this. People stealing magic from other people. And it's the quickest way to see if you're on the right track. So for me personally, deciding between decision and action took me a very long time before I was able to see it, somewhere between 10 and 15 years. So hopefully by me teaching it, I can save you that amount of time.
Let's cut down on the learning curve there for everybody else.
For everybody, that's the whole point of it.
Yep.
Because it's hard. Sometimes you can't tell. I don't know. I think sometimes it's actions. I think sometimes it's decision. So this is the quickest way to find out because, like I said, this one's decision driven. So the stuff that happens during each act, so these numbers represent the act structure of the piece, they will be different dependent upon those dynamics, you know, since it's a decision story. So this one, you have Layla is being ignorant about something. Then a decision happens, then the young witches walk something. Did you adjust these at all?
No.
No, okay. Well, then just get it for those watching along. It's just a feel for it. So there's some ignorance. Then there's some stuff that is done, some physical stuff. And then there's either some stealing or abduction or loss of things. And then at the end, there's some learning that goes in there. And that's the decision-driven story. So in this one, but you did do the plot points, right? So
yes, I did do the plot points.
Father decides to surrender his children to the coven, which is extremely depressing. Okay, or it sounds like it is, maybe it's not. Okay, so he decides to surrender his children to the coven, and then there'll be all kinds of misunderstandings there. And then the second one, Hepzibah Reuben decides to train Layla. And then there'll be a bunch of actions in there. I assume it's training sessions. Somebody decides to expedite the ritual. There's some kind of abduction or achievement or loss. Then Layla decides to be the guinea pig. And they learn something, and the kids decide to find their father and restore his magic. This is not a decision. This is an action.
Okay.
Besides, this one's nice. This one definitely is a decision. This one I have a trouble seeing what is the action that's forced because of it. It's like the act turns. So like the act turns are supposed to be actually change the context of it. They change the direction of the story. Like we're going along, and then everything's starting to peter out. And then in this case, somebody makes a decision, and now we're going to do all this other action.
Okay.
So it could be just from my strict intuitive sense right off the bat. It's not as strong as this. Like a father, like, what do I do? Do I keep my children or do I hand them over to the coven? Okay, I'm going to hand them over to the coven. I see that, and then now there's all this scramble for action as far as why did you do that, right? Deciding to train is like, well, then what would you say is the action that's forced because of that?
I think what that does is that gives Layla the opportunity to observe Reuben.
Okay.
And that is very much required that she get to know Reuben in order to realize that that she gets to know Hepzibah, which is actually Reuben, so that she recognizes that it's Reuben.
Okay, I could see that. There's just something about it that doesn't have the sort of same decision. Like this point in the Shawshank Redemption is the guard holding Andy over the rooftop, and he's going to let him go, right? And it's like, you better tell me something to make me decide not to throw you off. And then he decides not to. And then there's all this action afterwards where, because if he hadn't made that decision, then all that other stuff wouldn't have happened. There's a chance that Layla, from what I understand, Layla could have seen this stuff even if she didn't make that decision.
Well, no, because Reuben Reuben is actually moved by Layla's loyalty to her brother, and Layla in any other circumstance than Reuben saying that he would train her is that she would be sent away. She would be sent to the main part of the coven rather than this abandoned mausoleum house. So if Reuben doesn't make that decision, Layla doesn't stay.
So I would interpret that as, because of her actions of being loyal to her brother, that forces him to make the decision to train.
Okay.
Right? So then it's like, oh, okay, that's the cause and effect, like, there. So not to say that it's not a decision-driven story, but right now this is the weakest one.
Okay.
This one is closer to it. So what would be the reason for expediting the ritual?
Ebony, I don't know. Truthfully, I don't know. I was trying to, without having that part of the story written, I don't know. So I was coming up with what I thought would be act turns. So if Ebony, I don't know, if Ebony decides that that her way is really the right way, and she needs, in order to prove it, she needs to like ramp things up.
So who's the protagonist in all of this?
I've never known if it was actually Layla or not, because it could be Layla and it could be Reuben and or Ebony. Like within the coven, the people who are actually trying to take the kid's magic, or to take Cozy's magic.
Who wins in the end?
Cozy and Layla.
Okay, and it's a success story, right?
Right.
So that usually is an indicator. Whoever wins is usually the protagonist in a success story.
Okay, so that would be Layla and Cozy.
Yeah, as the protagonist is the one trying to achieve the goal resolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine if Dad surrenders his children to the coven, the goal is to escape the coven? To escape, right?
Yes.
Yeah, which that works great. So then this is the way to do it then. So then, okay, father decides to surrender his children to the coven. Layla's one of the children, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then that's why I would play with this. I would say tries to figure out, she gets surrendered to this coven, and now she's trying to figure out why her dad would ever do that, right? In the context of like trying to escape.
Okay.
Then there's some kind of decision. So instantly this makes a little more sense. And then Layla here, and what I'm doing here is, this is the overall story, so we're doing the plot, right?
Right.
Look at the player roles here. These are the different through lines. And the overall story, this black one, is what we're dealing with now. And this all contains a bunch of players, which are vessels for holding the perspective. So for this perspective, it's the overall story. And Layla, being the protagonist, is a very important one. So the cool thing about Subtext Because you can change this to be about any of those overall players, right? So we like
Okay.
Layla. Let's do the protagonist first. So she's trying to figure out, there's some decision, and then does she engage in the training? Is that what she's doing?
Yes, she does. And one of the first things, actually the most important thing that she learns is the first thing she learns, and it's actually a mistake on Ruben's part about what he trains her in. He thinks that auras are kind of useless, but it's his aura that actually gives him away eventually.
Okay. So I would say, assuming this is the right thing to do, I would say, so father decides to surrender. Layla tries to figure out what's going on here, and she realizes what the coven is all about. And then now she has a decision where she could either leave or stay. And it's like for a decision, usually there's a dilemma. It's like, I can either do one or the other. What am I going to do? And she's presented with that opportunity, and then she decides to say, now that forces all this other kind of action to happen.
Okay.
That's a possibility. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but that's how you.
It's just leaving is the opposite of what she wants at that point in the story. Leaving is, she's like, no, I want to stay with my brother.
Okay.
And so her action would be to convince, and Hepzibah Rubin's response would be to decide, yeah, okay, I'll train you.
All right, let me think about that one. So she trains and all that stuff goes on, and then now Ebony decides to expedite. What would that actually involve?
What's what called?
What would that involve? What does it mean by expediting the ritual?
Well, expedition is usually speeding something up, so.
But why is that a problem, I guess? Is it like Layla's not ready for it?
No, she wouldn't be ready for it. It would potentially make things more dangerous for Cozy. And Layla doesn't have enough power, enough knowledge to stop or fix or help or defend.
Okay. So then does she hurt somebody here in the third signpost? Or what is lost, or what happens because of that decision to expedite things? She lose her virginity? No, that's probably not.
What is it with you in that one?
I don't know. There, it stands out because nobody ever writes about that, so that's why I think it's funny to say it. Does she spark a rebellion? Does she win something, finish something, restore what is lost? And it doesn't have to be exactly it. It's just to get a general sense of the story.
Well, okay, so it could be that if Ebony has decided to expedite the ritual and it says Layla abduct, she could try and take Cozy out, like get him away. I mean, it would probably fail for all the reasons I've already said.
Like get rid of him? Is that the idea?
No, not to get rid of him, but like secret him away, if that makes sense.
Like steal him away?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's happened here is we came up with an idea of what this should be like, because a lot of these are really close. Like if you have steal, you have, oh, these are great. Steals from someone, stops someone from stealing, steals something. But it's like, well, maybe I want to do something a little more specific to my story, steal someone away, right? Isn't that what we decided?
Mm-hmm.
And then what you can do is, because it's one that's not a part of Subtext right now, you can just submit it to us, and then we'll take a look at it, and assuming that it fits the narrative structure, then we'll say, okay, and then when you come back, this will be black. The orange is to signify this is your temporary one. You say like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I have. I'm pretty sure it's reasonably close, but then we'll check it just to make sure you know, that it fits. So you're not off, you're not being too creative.
So you're not off in the weeds?
Not off on the weeds. Yeah, it's not about stifling creativity as much as it is making sure the structure stays reasonably intact. Because there's a reason why this beat happens here instead of at the very beginning. It also do with a whole bunch of different things, mainly with the idea that the narrative is about keep moving towards setting someone free, and you can save the lives of many. So that's what Layla's all about,
Mm-hmm.
setting someone free. So in that context, then, in the overall story, you want, after that midpoint, her to actually work towards stealing.
Setting someone free.
So then Layla decides to be the guinea pig, which feels really weak to me. I don't know if that fits. And then at the end, Layla learns. What could Layla possibly learn
From that decision? Well, okay, so what Layla learns, maybe we can like reverse engineer this. What Layla actually learns is that Hepzibah isn't Hepzibah, she's actually Reuben. So that's what she learns.
Okay. So she's about someone then.
And I don't know what decision could lead to that learning. This is a big long pause I'm going to edit out. I have no
No, you gotta leave it in. So that people understand that it takes a while to figure this stuff out.
What decision could lead to that learning? Maybe, oh, I know. Okay, well, so thought. What if the decision is that Layla decides to go into the ritual circle with Cozy, as in, if you're going to take my brother's magic, then you can have mine too.
Oh, that's great stuff. Is that the end of the story, or is that here? That's a really
well,
strong...
I've always pictured that as sort of the the final turn moment, the moment when things start to resolve.
Yeah, like the ending, right? I mean, like if
So,
this instead was Layla decides to enter the circle with Cozy, is that the idea?
yeah. Kosey.
Like that?
Yep.
Oops, let me do it the right way. Okay, so then now this is great because now it's like the whole way she's gonna have to keep fighting to get to a place where this is the ultimate thing. Like she's always either avoiding it or she doesn't quite want to enter it because she's afraid of what might happen. And then, so the end climactic moment, that's what this is. This isn't the last scene in the book. It's the end of the overall story, right? So it's like what resolves this problem with the coven and the children and the stealing of magic. And then she's able to overcome it by doing this.
Okay.
Actually, I assume that she walks in there, and because of that, she's able to save the day, right? Is that the idea?
Right.
Because it sounds like having that here might be a little early.
Okay.
Right? So
okay.
then what's might be nice is these decisions, if you always put it in the hands of Layla, and so here she decides, I still think she could decide, you got to give her some kind of dilemma, right? Like, so she could decide to stay or leave. She decides to stay, but then she like kind of backtracks, makes an easier decision, then takes the easy way out here, but then ends up finding the truth. And then it's like, okay, no, wait, I got to go back to what it is that I originally set out to do, which is to free. It's like if she did this would be, you know, like Layla decides to save herself instead of her brother or somebody. And then because of that, she learns the truth about somebody or whatever. Who is Cozy again? Isn't that?
Cozy's her brother.
That's what I thought. Okay, so then if she, maybe not her brother, but maybe somebody else, right? Like she chooses herself over somebody else. And then everything starts unraveling. That's where she learns it. And then she decides to enter it with Cozy. So that way, every single decision is always in her hands. And then by the end of it, she's actually able to break him free by making that huge decision.
Okay.
And whoever, you know, maybe whoever that is ends up dying or in the results of the decision. And then, so Layla trains, so husband decides to train Layla. I still feel like this should be Layla's decision somehow.
Okay. Maybe they give her the option. So she has to decide to stay.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure how to make that a conflict for her because that's really what she wants.
Right. Okay, so then think of it this way. So Layla decides to stay and protect her brother, right? I assume?
Oh. Well, that's an interesting thing. So, you know, my whole thing with the cookies.
Okay.
Maybe she has to opt to stay and be drugged.
Oh, that's nice. Agrees to be drugged, is that the idea?
Yeah. So she has to, she can't just stay. She can't just stay. She has to give up some of her agency, and that comes with like eating the cookies.
Yes. He decides to give up her agency, or some of her agency, to stay and help out her brother. That's awesome, right?
Yep.
So because of that decision now, this is going to be really hard. The training. It's not just like, hey, thanks for deciding to let me join in this. Now it's like, okay, now I'm drugged. I decided this, but I'm doing this for my brother, right?
Yes.
This one, this one's really crazy. This one I feel like should be, it'd be interesting if you could keep it with Layla. So she's drugged, she does the training, and she gets better at whatever it is that she was doing.
Does she get better at it? I actually no. Really the only thing that I've ever really seen her do that was magical was her ability to see the auras. But she doesn't learn like any sort of spell casting or, you know, how to use a wand or.
So make this somebody else's decision that makes it harder for her. So in The Matrix, right? You've seen that movie?
Mm-hmm.
This is where Joey Pants is eating steak, and he says, I know the steak isn't real, but it tastes amazing, and I love it, and I don't care. Ignorance is bliss, right? So he's choosing to stay in the Matrix. Just as long as you guys make sure I don't remember anything, I'll take care of it for you. So maybe Cozy, not that he necessarily completely betrays her, but maybe he or another significant character takes the easy way out that'll make it more difficult, that will force her to have to try and steal him away. Right? You see how that escalates the story?
Yes, but I thought that's what that whole thing with Ebony was that Ebony puts her in a position where she needs to take him away. So Ebony's decision to try and prove that her theory is the right one.
Oh, okay, that works too. I see what you're saying. But does she have a choice to do one way or the other? So she's in charge of it? Is that the idea?
Well, it's Ebony's spell. So she's sort of the orchestrator of all the components that fit together to do this ripening spell.
But she has that ability anyways, right? But is she necessarily like, is it up to her to decide one way or the other, or does she just do it because she can do it? Like, to make it a decision, it would be something that's like,
No. See, the whole thing has been given to Hepzibah to do, like all the other times that magic has been taken. And I've always sort of in my head had it that Ebony came unbidden.
okay.
And you know, she's got a stake in this too, because she's got a younger brother whose magic will manifest.
But I don't mean, yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but her doing that isn't really a decision as much as it's her taking action based on someone else's decision. Right?
True. Yes. Well, the way I'm describing it.
Yeah, well, that's the way you're describing it. So, I mean, you could still have that be the result of somebody else's decision as she does that magic, you know, which forces Ebony to use her magic, right? So then what would that decision be prior that forces her to do that?
These silences are awful.
Why? No, you wouldn't be, I mean, you can cut them out a little bit, but you want to leave them in a, so it's like people know the reality of that. It's not, it doesn't come right away. I go really fast just because I do this all the time. Plus, it's not my story, so it's really easy for me to make decisions like that. So I would say, yeah, it's either somebody, you know, Hepzibah decides to do something a different way or whatever, that then she's like, okay, fine, I'm gonna show them what I can do. Or Cozy makes some decision that then forces her to do that, or forces Layla to just simply steal him away because he's taking the easy way out or something like that.
I'm trying to think of how to give the decision to Layla so that these two girls are in conflict. What does Layla decide to do in the middle of the story? Her training would lead to the decision, is that right?
Yeah, anytime you can, because all these other ones are connected, right? It's like this leads to that, leads to this, leads to that. When you do that, it just gets a nice flow to it.
Okay, so Layla trains for something which leads her to a decision. What could she decide to do? I got nothing.
Nothing. Can we just use for now? Why don't we keep Ebony because this one you actually feel reasonably good about.
Okay.
So maybe Hep decides to what? To cut Layla or something, which forces Ebony to use her magic. Like he makes some decision or something that then forces her to use her magic. This might not fit exactly with what you have.
Okay.
But it might give you just a general idea. And so she accelerates it, things go bad, and now Layla's like, okay, now I gotta steal him away. that fails horribly, and then now she chooses herself over Cozy for whatever reason. I'm sure by then you can have that. Some reason that would make sense. And by doing so, that's when she learns the truth. And she's been escorted to a better place, but then she starts seeing the truth of what happens to people like Cozy when she just chose herself over there. Then that's when she decides to like go back in and enter the circle. It's like she had an original idea, like I'll do whatever, and then that eventually gets torn down to a place where then she's like, okay, now I'll risk myself to go back into the circle.
Okay. All right.
So there's two things. One, so what I just described, I'm pretty sure, yeah. So she's a steadfast character, right?
Right.
And she has a point of view, and then that gets either progressively torn down, and then she has to reaffirm it at the end, or it's something that gets built up, and by the end, then she's like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. So it just worked really nicely that she sets out originally like, okay, I'm going to save him no matter what. And then if you can work out, it gets torn down, and then she makes some bad decision, right, that she wouldn't necessarily make in character.
Okay.
If she realigns with her true character, it's going to feel like a changed story, but it's really not. It's just reaffirming that steadfastness. You know, it's like Woody in Toy Story, where I just play with Andy no matter what, and then that gets torn down, and then he realizes how selfish he's being, and then he goes back to just being a toy. So it feels like he's different, but he's really not. He's going back to what he originally was, and he's staying steadfast. So Layla is the same sort of feeling. So if you can capture some of that, it just makes for a really dynamic story.
Okay.
Assuming you like Decision. Now, did you like the action one better?
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Which is why I said to do it second.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to do that next episode, right?
Yes.
What I want you to do, so this is all saved in here. We can always come back to it if you decide, no, this is what I want to do. But now you have a good idea of what this story's like, right?
Yes.
And you know what it feels like, and you have a good idea of a really quick way to get, you know, it's like, okay, my father decided to send me off to this place. Now I'm going to try and figure it out because I want to care about my brother. All right, fine. I'll agree to be drugged in order to save him. And now I'll submit myself to all this training. And then what? I did all this stuff. Now somebody's going to cut me. Well, at least I have a friend here who's going to make things better. But that makes things worse. So now, okay, I just got to, we're going to escape, get out of here. Then comes to a crossroads where the only thing that she can possibly do is save herself and give up the kid. And then in doing so, that's when she learns the truth about what's really going on. And then she decides to go back to it. And that feels complete. It feels like, oh, that feels like a complete
Right.
story. You told me the whole thing. And you could do that, like we just did this in like 30 minutes, right? Which is fantastic. So, but you like the action-driven one. So what we do is we come back here and you just switch to this one, which is the action-driven story, right?
I have a question. So do you remember the scene that you read, hopefully, where she stands in the kitchen doorway?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a beer move or is that a doer move?
Is she actually, in your mind estimation, is she actually trying to put on a new persona? But the answer is she trying to actually change herself, putting on like an act, like a persona in order to change things?
No.
Physically just trying to stop somebody?
No, she's not trying to stop anybody. It's she is told to that it is impolite to dawdle in doorways, and so she follows Hepzibah to the kitchen and stops just inside the doorway and is leaning against the door jamb while she's waiting for Cozy.
Is it in her nature to dawdle in doorways?
It is in her nature to be contrary.
Oh, then I would say that's a beer.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's her persona that's causing conflict. Okay, so we go back here, and then, so we were just looking at the decision-driven story, and so the other one, is the action-driven story, which is a completely different dynamic. So here we have, now we just loaded up the action-driven narrative, and now the beats are going to be completely different because actions are driving decisions. So we have an action, and then something is understood. Somebody is drugged. That sounds familiar. There's some zipping of zippers. That sounds very, very compelling. There's an attempt to escape.
I told you I did not change.
Starts a ritual, school the poor, and restore the father's magic. Now this is very interesting because even though the dynamic is different, what, you know, the action-driven or decision-driven, this is the action-driven story. The actual order of signposts, thematic material, at least in the main plot, is exactly the same. So this is what's great about dramatic theory compared to anything else, is it's not like clear cut, every story is exactly the same. It's a combination of all these different dynamics that are playing together. The fact that she's steadfast, the fact that it's a success and that she feels good at the end. The action driver definitely plays into it. Her problem solving style being linear. All that stuff plays into it to where sometimes some of the through lines will be exactly the same, even if you have the story driver completely different, as in this case. Sometimes it'll be a completely different one. Or in this case, so when it comes to the plot is actually exactly the same. So it's going to be even harder for us to determine whether or not it's action or decision-driven story because it's the same exact plot sequence for an action-driven story as it is decision-driven story. So what we're going to do next week, well, this is going to be your assignment for next week, is
Okay.
take the experience of what we just did with the decision-driven story and do the same thing here and illustrate what actions force which decisions. Like in the other one, I came up with, okay, well, these decisions then force these actions. So you're
Okay,
going to
so what I hear you saying is the 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are the signposts, I'm going to make those into decisions or decision.
well, like the stuff that happens, the the actions that they're taking are in a response to an action that's happening in the plot point. So in other words, these are exactly the same. So the second one was train, right? Trains for something. And you're going to change all these to Layla as well, right? So this is the same thing as in the other one. Layla trains for something.
Okay.
But it's because of this action. So you see how it's very different. This is her being drugged without her compliance. It's almost like you're getting drugged. It's like, oh, shoot. Now am I going to decide to keep doing it? Or am I going to completely cop out of it? It's a completely different feel to the story, even though the plot dynamic or the plot thematics in each place are exactly the same.
Okay.
So I would go through this and match, and I would purposefully go through and match these signposts to be exactly the same, because they are. So that involves switching this to Layla, making sure this illustration is exactly the same, and then see how you can turn those plot points into actions that drive decisions, and see which one feels better to you.
Okay.
It's very hard for me right now because my head is so stuck in a decision-driven story now.
It's a good thing we're going to save it for next week. That's fine.
I was really hoping that the plot sequence would be different, because then it's like, oh, I see how it's different. One of the other through lines, or two of them, will be different. And maybe we could kind of go there, but I'd be interested to see how you're able to turn these into actions and to see which one you feel is more closely aligned to what it is that you're trying to write. The one thing I will say is, and maybe I should say this for next time so I don't bias you, and I will do that actually. I'm not going to say it. I will say it next time.
Write it down so you don't forget.
Yes, I know exactly what it is. Just remind me fish, and I will remember what that means.
Okay.
Okay.
Can do.
And yeah, so then that's what I would say is then just for next week, just go through turn these all into actions and see if you can get a flow, you know, like this leads to this, leads to this, leads to that. That feels great. Now, if you want to even take an extra step forward, I would add Hep is the antagonist, yes? Or who would you consider to be the, and who's the one trying to prevent Layla from winning?
Reuben is,
Ruben.
yeah, Reuben, Hepzibah, yes.
You want to drag Ruben into the overall story for sure so that he can be a part of that. And I would actually go through, you don't necessarily have to do it on both stories, but add a beat for Ruben so that you can see what the antagonist is doing. So here you have the protagonist, Layla, right? And she's not misunderstood, but they're both dealing with the
Would
same
confused work there?
Is confused?
Because so that beat is understanding, right?
Yes.
So she doesn't understand what's going on because she doesn't know anything about magic. So
instead of just confusion, because confusion is just like, it's a dead story beat, you always want it to be a process of stuff. So that confusion is her misunderstanding. I mean, it could just be has a misunderstanding of something. She doesn't get what's going on. So that still plays in your confusion, but it's an actual act of misunderstanding. Like, what is she doing because she doesn't understand it? She's trying to run away, she's trying to mess with things. And then here Ruben is like, hey, no, we're going to help you guys out. And so he's going to be trying to make them understand that this is a great thing. Right? So then that's how you tie protagonist and antagonist together in a narrative. They're going to deal with the same exact thematic material. They're just going to approach it from different angles.
Okay.
And this is a great way too to actually get decent conflict in your story because one is pursuing and the other one is preventing, but they're dealing with the same stuff and reacting to the same plot points.
Okay.
So I would definitely do both those with the action, and then we will pick it up next week.
Yay.
Sound good?
Sounds awesome. I'm on it.
Excellent. Have a wonderful week. Have fun writing, and then we'll see everybody next time.
Bye.